Great. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's iPASS webinar on next steps for implementation and cross-grantee connections. Before we begin with today's content, I'm going to turn it over to our program coordinator, Tran Lee, who's going to explain a little more about the GoToWebinar technology. We're trying to use this webinar to increase engagement and looking for your feedback throughout the webinar, so she'll provide some useful tips for that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to take a few minutes to explain how to use the GoToWebinar technology. In particular, I want to show you some features that allow us to make this session more interactive. You should see the control panel picture on your screen right now. If you don't, it is because it has been minimized, and you can pull that back out by using the Grab tab, which hides and shows the control panel. There's also an attendee list where you can see all of the participants on this call, and there are two ways for you to ask questions during this session. If you have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon on the control panel, or and then I can unmute your line. If for some reason you are having difficulty being heard when I unmute your line, you will want to make sure that you are not muted on your personal phone and that you've entered the audio pin provided to you at the beginning of the call. If that doesn't work, you can hang up and call back in and be sure to enter the audio pin. And another way for you to participate is through the question pane. You can type your question in the question pane, and I can read it to the group or respond privately. All panes can be expanded or minimized by clicking the plus or a minus button that are on the top left of each pane.
Great. Thanks, Tran. So the iPASS staff, we're really excited to have the chance to meet so many of you at the convening a couple weeks ago. Lori, unfortunately, is not able to be on the webinar today. She's on a site visit for another initiative, but Julia and I are really excited to be speaking with you again today. So the focus of today's webinar is on the next steps for implementation and also talking more about some of the cross-grantee connections that are made in this learning network. So our hope is that today's session is really interactive and engaging, so please be prepared to raise your hand and submit comments or questions in the chat box. When you raise your hand, we'll unmute your line. And then we also want to provide an opportunity here at the beginning to share any reflections or reactions that you have as a result of the first iPASS convening a couple weeks ago. And then we're going to talk about some of those areas of connections that we've identified across grantees. And we have a list started of these areas, but I'll also hope that you'll share some ideas you have for connections you'd like to make across grantees and share that in the chat box throughout the webinar. Then we'll talk about some of the challenges, some of those common challenges that we've heard across grantees and how we might start addressing these through the Learning Network and through our technical assistance support. We'll then take a minute to highlight some of the next steps for implementation. And one of those, as I'm sure you're aware, is the Readiness for Technology Adoption Self-Assessment, the RTA. And we're excited that Lara Gambino and Danielle and Salako at Egan are joining us from Gutman Community College, and they're going to share some of their reflections on the process and their experience with the RTA. We'll conclude with a few thoughts and tips on completing your action plan, and then leave less time at the end for any other questions or comments that you have. So as I mentioned, this is one of those times when we'd love to hear from you all, either raising your hand virtually and we'll unmute your line, or share a comment in the chat box, specifically debriefing the convening. Any thoughts, new ideas, new connections or reactions, or maybe you have a lingering question as a result of the convening. So as you think about the questions you want to ask, either raising your hand or putting them in the chat box, I'll just share that I want to thank you all for the amazing energy that you brought and your teams brought to Indy. It was great to hear the room abuzz with all the conversations and sharing. And the goals for the convening were really to start facilitating that cross-grantee engagement, provide specifics about the grant, including evaluation, and also provide some initial exposure to some of that important change leadership that you'll be doing as a result of your iPASS work. So since we have Laura and Danielle on the line, I'm going to go ahead and put them on the spot and see if they have any thoughts you'd like to share about your iPASS convening experience.
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is Laura Gambino from Gutman. I guess a couple of things. I think, one, it was great to kind of meet everybody and to start having those cross conversations, because it's always helpful to kind of hear the common, both the common successes and the common challenges, and to get that sense that you're not alone as you're doing this work, or you're not the only campus that's experiencing this. And it was great to have so many people who are thinking along the same lines, with the, putting their efforts into the same type of work with the same types of goals that we are here. I think the other thing that jumped out for me, as I brought back, was, as we were going through the day, and of course we were all joking about talking about the penguins all day, but to think about kind of those different types of roles and those different penguins and who they are, and how to kind of bring them into your team and use them strategically to advance our change leadership efforts. So that's something I'll be taking back.
Right, and for me, this is Danielle and Salako-Egan. Hi, everybody. For me, it was especially helpful to hear from some of the iPASS 1 grantees, because they've gone through some stuff that we're already going through as we've been recently implementing other technology before we even came on board with the iPASS grant. So it was helpful to hear those perspectives, and even if we've already secured our vendors, it was good to keep in mind some important things about communicating with vendors that I think are going to go far for us as we go to the next phase of this project.
So we do have one comment, which is from Laurie Fladd, so thank you, Laurie. It says, I was very glad to meet our data coach and got very valuable insight from the iPASS Round 1 attendees. I think there was a lot of agreement on that as well from the results of the survey we've seen so far. And I also learned that I did not have to accomplish 1 million goals to be successful, which is a great lesson for everyone to learn in life, not just in iPASS.
Right, that's true. Great. Thank you all for sharing those reflections. So EDUCAUSE sent, I think most people probably have completed by now the evaluation link that they sent. So that'll be another place for us to hear more about your thoughts, and particularly as we look to plan out future webinars and future convenings and taking that into account. And I think we have another comment.
Yeah, so we've got Rosalind, I think from UT San Antonio. Like Laura mentioned, it was great to meet others planning on implementing the same technology. Again, something that we've heard other grantees say. Thank you, Rosalind.
Yeah, great. And actually with that idea of talking with others around similar technologies, that's one of the areas of connections that we were hearing. I think some of you all were doing that naturally and organically in the convening, but that's one of the places that we're going to take the next step and provide you with a full list of all 26 iPASS grantees and the technologies that they're currently using or looking to use. So project leads, I sent out the technology discovery document, and many of you have returned that to me. Thank you so much. So we're going to compile that, and that'll be another resource for you as you're looking at, wanting to learn more about others who are using similar technologies and the ways that they've deployed that. So there's also other areas, I think, of connection that we're already heard from you and are going to try and incorporate. In addition to the technologies, several people talked about new position descriptions, new positions that are being created for this iPASS work, whether it's as specific as a starfish coordinator or as broad as a project manager for iPASS. So there was some interest expressed among grantees to share position descriptions. So if you're one of those grantees that has a position description, I think this could be a great way to utilize that iPASS community listserv. So I'd encourage you to post that either as a question or go ahead and post your own position description. And I think that you probably saw the welcome email about the iPASS community listserv starting today. So hopefully we can use that space to capture some of that sharing. A couple others that we noted, there was a lot of interest in learning about effective incentive models for deploying this work. And then also strategies for engagement and communication. There seemed to be some common interest in connecting around, whether it's communication about iPASS as a whole or integrating that into a student success agenda. Those are some of the connections that we've been noting and will be trying to facilitate among the grantees. So those are just a few of the ones that we initially have that we'll be working on. And we'd love to hear from you if you type in the chat box throughout the webinar what else you would like to learn from other grantees. So I encourage you to do that, and then we'll be looking at those as we move the work forward. So now I'm going to turn it over to Julia to talk more about some of those common challenges that have emerged through various forms.
Yep. Thank you, Mayan. So on your screen, there are 2 slides on the common challenges that are coming up. This is the first one. And so based on your proposals, on your RTA self-assessment, and on the individual calls that we've had with all of you so far, as well as the iPASS convening, we've identified the next 2 slides as the key common challenges across most, but not all, grantees. And so we've kind of grouped them into 4 themes, and you'll see the first 2 themes on your slide here. On the slide here, so that's engagement and communication, and data and technology. And these are by no means an exhaustive list. It's just a couple of themes that have really stood out right now, and we're aware that these will change over the course of the grant, and may even be changing by dream. But we'd really like to be able to keep on top of this. So if you can, we're going to be asking for your feedback at various points throughout the grant period, and we'd really appreciate any feedback that you can give us on the technical assistance and support that we're providing you, so we can make sure it's as useful as possible. So if we move on to the next 2 themes, we're advising policies and practices, and strategy and planning. And so we're trying to use these themes to design our technical assistance for you, to help with the capacity building of each of the grantees in these areas, as well as other areas that we identify. So again, as Mayan said with the other slide, we'd like you to type in your responses into the chat box at any point throughout this webinar to the question, what other challenges do you anticipate facing? And that can be anything that you think that could happen in the next year, or anything even after that, something like if you're worried about what will happen when the grant funding goes away, or when you don't have this iPASS community to support you. So we really hope that you share your views on that as well. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit more now about the next steps that none of these are new. They're all on the timeline that is on ATD Connect, and that has been shared with you in multiple other ways. But we just wanted to give a little bit more information, and this acts as a reminder as well. So the first item that you'll see is ATD Connect office hours. ATD office hours for the RTA self-assessment. And so they're on November 18th from 2 till 5, and you can call that number, and just if you have any questions or feedback or comments or anything on absolutely anything, but specifically the RTA, then we're more than happy to chat during those times, and really any other time. But we will actually be in our offices at that time, specifically waiting for you. So the next step is the final RTA self-assessment for each institution is due by November 27th. So any institution that has asked for their team to submit individual RTA self-assessments, we do ask that you also submit an overall institutional one through that Qualtrics link, so that we can give you a final report view and share the final report with your coaches as well. And so after that, we have a webinar on vendor engagement in January. You can see the time and the dates there on the screen. Then the action plan for your iPASS project will be due by February 12th, 2016, just before Dream. And then we move on to Dream, which we're all very excited about here. It's getting to the busy phase before Dream. And so we've got a pre-institute for the grantees specifically at Dream on Tuesday, February 23rd. And that will be from 1 until 4 p.m. And we'll also have an iPASS reception specifically for grantees on the Wednesday of that week. So we really encourage you. We know it's optional, but we really hope to see a lot of you there and a lot of your teams there. And if you have any questions about anything else and how you can make the most of your time there, then please just email us, call us, let us know, and we'll help you out. And so the final thing, you can see the arrow at the bottom of the screen. Over the fall and the spring, you'll all be having your first site visit with your iPASS coach. And so we ask that you begin scheduling that visit now. I believe the majority of them will happen in the spring, but there is some flexibility for the fall if you really need it for then. So please be in touch with your iPASS coaches to schedule those. Okay. So we'll move on to the next slide. We will move on to hearing from Gutman Community College about their reflections from taking the RTA self-assessment. So over to you.
All right, thanks, Julia. So again, this is Laura and Danielle from Gutman, and we wanted to start off just by giving everybody a little bit of a background about who we are as an institution. So we are a brand new community college. We opened up in August of 2012. We are part of the City University of New York, which is comprised, there's what, 28 institutions that make up CUNY. But we are the newest community college, and we were designed with a very different educational model focused on preparing urban community college students. And as you can see, just to get an idea of our student body, about 90% of our students are underprepared for, either math, some combination of math, reading, and writing. And about 50% of them are first-generation college students. So, that's kind of who we're working with. And our college, when a few years ago when they first started planning the college, what ended up happening, people were going to the chancellor saying, we should try this to improve graduation rates, we should try this. And he said, what would happen if we designed a new community college just from scratch, from the ground up, looking at what research says works with this population? So from that, we developed our educational model, which I could do a whole presentation on, so I'll give you like the 30-second view of our model. All of our students are full-time in the first year. They are in interdisciplinary first-year learning communities. They have a required first-year curriculum. Our faculty and our advisors work very closely together throughout that first year and an instructional team. In the second year, we have a limited number of majors or programs of study. We only have 5 majors for the students to choose from, avoiding that kind of cafeteria-style approach. And then another unique thing that we do here that applies to our iPASS project is that we use ePortfolio at scale across our curriculum. So ePortfolio is a pedagogical tool as well as a tool for assessment. Add anything to that? Nope.
So Project GAP, which is Gutman's advising and planning project, is really a complement to our educational model in so many ways. The advising curriculum really begins with our students in the very first semester, and all students take as part of the learning community a mandatory year-long first-year seminar. We begin the utilization of ePortfolio in that first-year seminar, and what we'd like to do with our project is really develop components of the seminar that improve students' ability to understand how to build an educational plan and then how to take it with them after they leave that seminar and refine it over time all the way through to the end of their degree. So we're going to be utilizing the ePortfolio, the education modules, to create activities within the first year seminar that will help students develop those ed plans. Likewise, the college has already implemented Starfish Early Alert, and we know that it works and that it's helping us to strengthen our counseling and coaching activities on campus already. What we want to do with Starfish Connect is really take to scale, by involving many other departments on the campus, the ability to do outreach to students, connect them to services, get them the help they need, and then close that loop by ensuring that our faculty, who very much are engaged with our students on a one-to-one basis, are fully aware of the kind of activities students are doing outside the classroom. And finally, we're going to implement Starfish and ePortfolio, both of which are going to present predictive analytics to us and we're going to utilize that data in order to do some more risk targeting, which we really haven't undertaken yet, and also think about how we might want to improve our interventions. So what our hope is, our aspirational outcome, as you guys encouraged us to think about, is to increase our fall-to-fall retention rate to 80% by 2018. It's currently at
Currently, it's hovered at about 70 to 71%. Our target when the college was opened, our target retention rate was 75%, and we have yet to achieve that. So it's been right around 69, 70, 71 each year. So we're hoping that we can use kind of each of these pieces and bump that up, not just to the 75, but we'd like to see it, if we can get it closer to 80%.
Right. And for me as Director of Advising, the educational plan is really the key, which is why I'm so happy we were able to connect with this grant. Because although we do so much for students in the first year, we're really still building our second year program of study advising curriculum, and having students take those ed plans out of the first year into the second, I think is going to really help with that persistence.
And then I think for me, well, I mean, I love all of it, but the risk targeting is of particular interest to me because, you know, what we want to be able to do is kind of take, you know, reflections from students' portfolios. Let's say, you know, one of their early activities, they do a SWOT analysis. And if they identify math preparation, let's say, as one of their weaknesses, we can then take that data and use Starfish to proactively give them a student success plan that focuses on improving their math preparation, maybe getting them in touch with an advisor or a peer mentor early on to help them get on track to success. So those are just some of the pieces that we're both interested in.
So very quickly on the next slide, just to give you an idea, I mean, we got to meet all of you, of course, at the convening, and maybe you walked by our poster with a glass of wine or maybe 2 glasses of wine. Our team is comprised of Laura's our Associate Dean for Assessment and Technology. I'm the Director of Advising. I have a little bit of a fancier title, Student Support and Academic Achievement.
Got that right, too.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And we also have our CIO as well as our Dean of Strategic Planning. And we built an extended team with whom we met to begin the RTA process. That includes 2 full-time faculty members, 2 advisors on my team, one working with the first year and one working with the second year, the director of our Office of Partnerships, which is Gutman's equivalent of Career Services, Career Development, and Internships, as well as the director of the Center for College Effectiveness, who looks at all of our data and helps us make sense of it.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about our process. I mean, we decided to go ahead and get a jump start on this because, as Danielle just mentioned, we, in August, launched Starfish Early Alert. So we were in the midst of kind of doing the first stage or the pre-stage from iPASS's perspective of our technology initiative. So we really wanted to get a sense of, should we have done this? Or you know, were we ready, and what things would we need to focus on? So what we did, you know, we asked each of those team members, the full extended team, to complete the RTA framework. We did ask them to submit their scores using the Qualtrics link that Mayanne shared with all of us. We gave them, I think, about a week to 10 days to do that. After that, we got back the aggregate report from Achieving the Dream, and we set up a 2.5-hour facilitated discussion. And, you know, interestingly, when we first sat down at the discussion, people were like, 2.5 hours? We're not going to need 2.5 hours for this discussion. We used every second of that 2.5 hours. It really did take a long time when we got into kind of the meat of the discussion. We did ask an external facilitator to work with us for that 2.5-hour conversation. And I think that was really key. I mean, any one of us on the team, you know, we're all capable of facilitating that discussion, but we all wanted to be objective and active participants, actually, you know, and it's hard to be a participant when you're facilitating the discussion. So I asked one of my colleagues, another associate dean here in academic affairs, to come in and just be that objective facilitator, and she kept us moving along. You know, she took notes as she went and was able to kind of synthesize discussions and keep us focused and not letting us get too bogged down in the weeds. And what you see here, by the way, this is what we got back from Achieving the Dream to help with that discussion. And it really was helpful to have this report and to have these charts up, and we had them displayed on a smart board throughout the conversation as we went through each section. And we talked about, kind of what we saw, what the scores were. We talked about the comments. We didn't ask people to take ownership of their comments, but in many cases they did because they wanted to talk about why they wrote what they did and, talked about things from their perspective. And so it was really, I think it was a great discussion. One we probably should have had, 6 months ago or even a year ago with all the technology we're using here. But it was really interesting. I mean, we had people, not just from a cross-section of the institution, but who had been here for different lengths of time. Some of us had been here, since the opening of the college 4 long years ago, and some people who had just been here for a few months. And it was interesting to see their perspective on technology as compared to someone like myself, who's been doing this every day for so long. So from the discussion, we actually learned quite a bit, and we came to the conclusion that we are overall poised for action. And we debated on this in a couple of areas, particularly communication, which has been a big challenge area for us. But we decided that overall we rated ourselves as poised for action, but we did make note of a number of challenges that will require attention as we grow to scale. And one thing I didn't say when I was talking about Gutman, we currently have 824 students, but we have a target population of 5,000 students that we're supposed to be reaching by 2025. So we're looking at some pretty significant growth over the next few years, and thinking about how we maintain that readiness for action and readiness to work with technology as we grow. So some of the challenges probably won't seem unique or may seem familiar to you. Professional development, professional development, like that to me is one of the key things. How do we engage faculty and our advisors in this work and really make them active participants and recognize and value what they're doing? Our iPASS project and this technology is really going to change the way we do things. We have a lot of structures in place that bring advisors and faculty together. Weekly team meetings, the instructional teams, program coordinator, and advisor meetings in the second year. But how do we use technology to make those meetings more effective? And if we want it to be that the technology is integrated into the practice and not just an add-on, we really need a lot of professional development. How do we build out support? How do we provide incentives? And then for me, one of the most challenging things that I see us facing, and some of you may recall I talked about this during the meeting, is the challenges of implementing things at scale. Here at Gutman, if we think something works, we implement it with all of our students. We have not done the traditional, pilot in a small project and build it out little by little. We start at scale, and we've actually experienced a little bit of the kind of chaos, as I like to call it, that occurs when you do that, because when something's not working quite right or you need to tweak something, everybody's affected by it. And so that brings a different level of challenge to our work that we need to be very conscious of as we think about our action plan for iPASS.
So what we would recommend, if you were to ask us, would be to definitely take advantage of using the Qualtrics survey link right away and get your folks started individually. I was really excited by the idea of bringing an external person into the mix. I think it just changed the entire dynamic. Likewise, having that person there not only gave us the opportunity to really dig in ourselves, but it also created a safe space, which was especially important because when you've got the CIO in the room and you want to talk about whether we're ready for technology implementation, that could present, some challenges or some concerns. And likewise, when there was discussion of advising and whether we were professionally ready, that was something that I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to think through and do it in a way that didn't make anybody feel defensive. So having that person there really helped to create that safe space, but also we made sure to set that as a parameter at the outset of the meeting so that there were ground rules. And another ground rule we had, for instance, was we did insist that everybody have an opportunity to be heard before another person started speaking. And there were a couple of times during the meeting where our external person had to remind people of that ground rule, and that's fine. Everyone's very passionate about what we're doing, but we also want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get their thoughts out. Likewise, we did need all of that time, that 2.5 hours, and in fact, after this, before the process is finalized, we're going to take an opportunity to get together again, go over our RTA again. We want people to do some reflection on their own and then come back together for one final review before we submit it. I would also recommend that everybody be open to the process, because you might hear things you don't necessarily like from your colleagues. You also could hear some really great things that may help you think you're in the clear, but of course you have to be very open-minded about that too. And then finally, in addition to listening to your colleagues, you really want to know your penguins. We did this before we came in for the seminar, so we didn't have the advantage of having that knowledge, although some of us had done some of the work before with Cotter's book. But now that everybody is on the same page and you have the opportunity to do that before you do your RTA, think about that as you begin to build your team. And I think Laura wants to add to that.
I was just going to add, I think it's important to have kind of all those different voices and those different penguins. She likes that term more than I do, at the table, and thinking about and having them on the team and thinking about the ways that you can use those different voices and those different roles to help more effectively enact change at your institution.
I will say 3 of the 4 core leaders on the team are Alice's, so we know we have to bring in a lot of other people to make sure that change can happen in an appropriate way.
So I think that's it from our end.
That's it.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, big thanks to Laura and Danielle for sharing your experiences and your process with the RTA. And we know that a lot of you have or are soon going to be completing that, and so we hope that that's helpful. And if you have questions for our Gutman colleagues, please again feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat box. We also really appreciate this opportunity to highlight one of the institutions in the iPASS network, so you can get to know them in a little more depth. So we hope to keep incorporating this opportunity for a different institution in all the future webinars. So we'll be coming for you for those future ones. So one part of the next steps with the RTA is thinking about how you might use this to inform your action plan. And we had a few tips for you as you think about that. So, first is if you, find yourself in rating at moderate or minimally prepared, what are those key activities that you need to incorporate into your plan to increase your readiness to poise? And how might you need to target resources to get you there? And then similarly, if you're already poised, make sure that you've built in the supports you need to ensure success in those areas, in those poised for action areas for readiness. Also, I think it's a good idea to consider, your team composition based on the areas you need to strengthen as you look at your readiness for technology adoption. Are there certain gatekeepers you need to bring in, or certain other penguin types that may help you find success in those readiness areas? Additionally, finding ways to leverage your strengths. I think that's one of the great things that comes out of this, is both seeing some of the strengths and seeing some of the areas that you may need to strengthen. And then finally, thinking about, as you go through this process, does the RTA illuminate any areas of support you need from your iPASS coach or from Achieving the Dream? So we'd also love to hear your feedback on your experience with the RTA. We've initiated a discussion board post in ATD Connect, so feel free to tell us about your experience, share that with others, or contact me or Julia. Also feel free to debrief that with your iPASS coaches, because they'll be interested in hearing that. This is a tool that we've specifically created for iPASS, and hope to learn from your experiences and how we can use it in the future. Because I think in many ways, even though this in the title is about technology, there's a lot of use for this readiness type of self-assessment and a lot of the change work and student success work that everyone is doing. Finally, I just wanted to note the ways that ATD will be using your completed RTA self-assessments, the one that you submit for your institution. So, the first is we're going to share it with your iPASS coaches, so this will help inform their site visits with you and things for them to be looking for as you build out your action plan. We're also going to summarize and share any interesting findings or commonalities across the different submissions. So, this will be entirely confidential, but it may be that there's some themes that emerge from everyone's submissions that might be interesting for you to hear about. So we'll be sure to do that as well. So we now want to open it up, if there's other questions or suggestions. I did want to make a note about site visits as you're looking ahead to planning those. I know many of you are already in conversation with your iPASS coaches to identify that time. If you're not, then likely I and your coach will be reaching out soon. I did want to note there was some confusion. This first site visit, it does include a one-day Cotter training session, the Change Essentials session, for 20 people from your institution. So, be thinking about what 20 individuals you might want to bring together and strategically think about who would be helpful to have in the room and who's important to this iPASS project. We'll be, sending more details about the logistics for those, but I did want to put that on your radar as you're thinking about how to, when you might want to schedule this time, and others that you want to make sure that their schedules are available for that site visit. So I'll give just a minute and see if any questions come in. This is one of those cases where we're given a gift. We've zipped through some of this webinar content, and so we're going to probably end early unless we have questions or any challenges or other comments that have been brought forth.
We do have one challenge, again from Lori Flad. I anticipate the software implementation challenge taking too much time. It's hard to balance the time it takes to make quality processes occur and how fast you need it to occur so that you can gather data for your grant. I don't think that's an unusual one either. Oh, there's an additional one from Lori. I think there are a few things on the RTA assessment, like training, that we have not planned out yet. I know we are lacking preparation here, so I guess we include those plans in our action plan.
Yes, that's a great question. So I agree. I think that will be where maybe you'll find some alignment between the RTA and the action plan. That the action plan is what you can use to build out some of those activities to support that work.
Great. We have another one from Mary Beth Worley. We have been meeting with our group to fill out the RTA. Are each team members expected to fill out an individual survey?
So that's really up to you and the process that you'd like to use. So if you would like, as Laura and Danielle mentioned, one option that several colleges are taking are for the individuals to submit using that Qualtrics link so that we can then provide an aggregate report, a summary that can be used by the facilitator when you have your discussion as you're coming up with your institutional submission. So that's on a case-by-case basis. Let us know what your preference is. It sounds like it was really helpful for Gutman team, and Mary Beth, sounds like now you're bought in. So great.
If
let
I
us
could
know when you want the deadline. Yeah,
if I could just come in, it really was useful for everybody to submit using the link, because then you get the aggregate scores very nicely and very easily presented, so we could see kind of how many people thought we were poised, how many people thought we were moderate, and it just made the discussion move along a little more quickly and made it a little more effective.
Great. Great. Thank you. Thanks.
There were no other comments or questions from the audience, but I would just like to throw out another plug for DREAM 2016. The registration for the pre-institute is currently being set up, so we will be in touch with you shortly, sending that registration link out. But we encourage you to go to our website at www.achievingthedream.org/DREAM2016 and just have a look at some of the other sessions that might be going on and what you can expect, as well as start booking your hotel now.
And Julia, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the ideas we have for the content of the DREAM iPASS focus sessions?
Sure. So I think the pre-institute is going to be a fairly engaging workshop. We want to make sure it's as useful as possible to you, so we're using the feedback we're getting from the first iPASS convening to inform what we do at DREAM. But it's really, I think, going to be focused on engagement and communication, as well as refining your action plans with your coaches. So it's engagement and communication of iPASS generally, and of your specific projects, has been something that came up pretty much in every conversation we've had in the various formats since the start of this project. So we're going to really focus the pre-institute on that aspect. And after that, we've got 3 concurrent sessions, 1 spotlight session, a birds of a feather discussion session, all dedicated to various iPASS topics. And these are the ones that have been set up specifically by Mei Yen and I, along with the coaches. So there'll probably be other ones dotted out throughout, and they're going to be focused on so using predictive analytics, using starfish, and different models for doing that. There'll be a session specifically for faculty who are involved in this process and what their role is, so that they can get make connections and start discussing what their role is and what it means for them. So that's a very brief highlight, but we will be sharing that some more in-depth information on that soon.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us, and another big thanks to Laura and Danielle for sharing with us both about your project and also about your RTA experience. We really appreciate that. And as always, feel free to contact us with any questions or comments that you have along the way, and we'll look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks.